Very exciting. I'm going to take another sip of tea. And I'm going to drink some water before we get ready.
No, I'm good.
Welcome to the Greatest Story Podcast with your hosts, Zac
and Josh.
We are here to discuss and react. Oh, man, messed it up.
That's okay.
Should I keep going?
We all fall down sometimes. We can keep going. Okay. This is all natural.
Okay, we're reacting to some of the greatest stories ever told in real time.
Yep.
We will look at books, movies, video games, and all forms of storytelling to figure out what makes a good story and what are some of the greatest stories.
Yeah. And just like we have to apologize for our opener here.
Yeah, that was brutal.
It's after work. We're hanging in there. Anyways, but just like that, we also have to make some apologies and corrections. Last time, Zac had to apologize to his library friend, not the library friend. Bringing it back. This time, I, as a foolish gorilla, like Zac was a foolish baboon, I must apologize. My little brother notified me that we grievously erred when it came to talking about Bad Batch actors and Star Wars actors in general. And so I must repent and recant. Mea culpa. D. Bradley Baker is, in fact, an American. Michelle Ng, just like the Avatar. Well, like her name, Ng, the Avatar. But the Avatar is not from New Zealand. But Michelle Ng is from New Zealand. And God Emperor King Tamora Morrison, just, one of the greatest actors of our time.
Also wins the award for playing the most characters ever.
Although they're CGI, but still they have a space.
Yeah.
Tamora Morrison, also New Zealand. So we apologize, little brother. Forgive me.
Yeah. And along with apologizing about brotherly figures.
Ooh, that was good.
Thanks. So we mentioned in our episode 2 on Gladiator, we mentioned Joaquin Phoenix, who I think we pronounced as Joaquim or something like that. It was brutal. Just forgive us. That was awful. Super cringe. And Joaquin, if you ever listen to this podcast
and we get 5 million subscribers,
I really hope that you feel genuinely honored that we took the time to correct ourselves.
And you can still join.
But
Absolutely. Only if we have 5 million subscribers.
Yep. Okay, well, Josh, now that we've got our apologies and corrections and misinformation propaganda out of the way,
yeah.
Are there any good stories that you've consumed recently?
Yeah, speaking of propaganda, I don't know. I don't have a connection here. Looking for a connection, just like you look for pineapples in each episode, I made it. My wife and I have been watching Psych episodes off and on. Phenomenal TV show. Classic early 2000s, fashion-wise, jokes-wise. But we've been watching Psych, which it's not a new show, but that's what we've been watching.
Yeah, that's good. Great show. We could go for quotes for hours on that show.
Come on, son.
I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it both ways. Yeah, don't be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the jelly.
Don't be a gooey chocolate chip cookie.
Ooh, yeah, good job, Gus. Sean.
Gus. About Gus, yeah. Okay. Well, some story news that we're excited for as we look forward to May the 4th, which is coming up very soon at the time of this episode releasing. And May the 4th will have Disney producing Tales of the Empire, which is a series of short episodes that will release on May 4th, similar to how they released Tales of the Jedi last year.
Where you watch Yoda's girlfriend get murked by Count Dooku.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I guess sorry for the spoilers. Spoiler alert retroactively.
It's been out for a year at least. So.
R.I.P. Yaddle.
Yeah. So we're really excited about that. It's good to tap into the dark side of the Force and see what we can see.
Yeah. Speaking of seeing what we can see, we see that we have a few free Patreon members. And while we're not always going to call out free Patreon members as we gather steam, we're happy to recognize you. So first one, I was not there for this, and I'm offended, Gabe, because, you haven't completed the collection. but Gabe is the first person to ask for an autograph. And so, Zach, thanks you for your support. I will wait to see what happens next and see if I can give you my support. We also got an email from 15063. What do the numbers mean?
Mason.
Yep.
Every episode.
Every time I see numbers, you could say it's a Call of Duty that I have.
Ooh, there we go.
Thanks for your comments and your loving support. We appreciate that. We also got an email from I Love Yamaho. Thanks for finding the podcast. Seems like you stumbled upon it, so thanks for that. And thanks for reaching out. We also want to thank John for his kind comments on YouTube. Way to go, man. We appreciate you. And also, there's a lot of you boys commenting on YouTube, so keep those going. Maybe you too will get a shout out for that. But going back to the free Patreon, we want to thank our free Patreon members, my kids, not my kids. Their name's my kids.
But my kids.
But my kids. But they're not mine.
They may be actual kids or not.
I was so afraid you were going to say something else there. I do have a kid. Only one. We also want to thank Evan and Cimaril Luthian 98. But yeah, that's what we got, Zach. So what are we talking about today? This is our first episode where we're doing the thing we set out to do. So what is the thing?
Yeah, really exciting. Now that we've got the framework, we're going to jump into the story. And the first story that we're covering is The Lion King. So good. Just can't wait to be king. So we've got a rubric. If you remember from episode 3, we have a rubric that has come out in that episode, and we're going to use the same ideas that we talked about in that episode to go through, to hear what we can find, to see what we can find.
I think it's hear colors.
Yeah, sorry, my senses are wrong. I'm using the wrong senses. We're going to use those things that we talked about back in episode 3 to figure out what makes The Lion King a good story. Yeah.
If you want to follow along, you can get on Patreon. And, you know, if you like and support, maybe you'll find some access to notes just waiting for you over there.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to have some more content coming out for our Patreon members. So, Josh, one of the things that we mentioned in episode 3 was that a good story, in our minds, must contain a clear plot.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have a journey you're going on, if you don't have a clear trajectory, then you're just wandering aimlessly around. But apparently, not all those who wander are lost.
That was smooth. That was really good. So how does Lion King present a clear plot for you?
Yeah, well, it's definitely... we talked a little bit about Hero's Journey. And so there's some elements of that lend itself to having a clear plot for the main protagonist, Simba, who has, a compatriot that accompanies him, Nala, and you watch them grow, right? So Zach, actually, I think you talked about this a little bit last episode too, right? We watch characters grow up.
Yeah, physically and also mentally.
Emotionally, spiritually, right? And Simba does all three of those things very clearly. So that's very simple, right? Like you watch him as a child, you watch him as a teenager, you watch him as a grown adult, and he unravels a lot of things that happened to him and a lot of the traumatic things as a child, which for context, this is set in like an amalgamation of multi-biomes from Africa. And it's just a classic Sahara meets jungle, safari animals journey where you have the kings, the lions, but that's my initial foray into this. What about you?
Yeah, I think the plot is really, really cool. And one of the things that I love about the plot is it is a circular plot that is based on the idea of, at least in the animated version, it's the opening song. You also watched the animated live action version.
The live action that's not live action. I was expecting real lions, so I did not get this.
Yes.
But the newer Lion King, yes.
Did they do the song at the beginning of that one as well?
They do.
The Circle of Life.
Circle of Life.
Yeah. Not quite Elton John, but still really good.
I'm practicing. We'll get there.
Yeah.
If we get 5 million subscribers,
Josh will master his voice like Elton John.
No, I mean, if we get 5 million subscribers, we might have enough income for me to take voice lessons.
That would be cool. So if you want Josh to sound like Elton John,
that's not going to happen.
5 million. If you wanted to be close, 5 million.
What have we done?
So with the Circle of Life, which is introduced in the beginning in this opening song, kind of setting the whole tone of the movie, the whole tone of the story, the plot itself follows this circular motion where we end the movie in the same place that we began the movie, which is a super, super cool idea. So the uncle wants the throne. The uncle takes the throne. The prince runs away, but then the prince finds confidence and closure. The prince returns. There's a final conflict and resolution, and then the prince becomes the king.
Just like hero's journey, return to normal life.
Return to normal life. Yeah, so there's some elements of the hero's journey. I think that Lion King does not follow the hero's journey as strictly as something like Aragon or Star Wars is very clear. So you can see those stories for a more evident version of the hero's journey. But what we noticed was something very interesting in The Lion King was that instead of the hero's journey, it actually follows
a chiasm.
A chiasm.
One of Zach's favorite words.
That is true. A chiasm is quite fascinating.
You want to explain a chiasm real quick?
I would love to. A chiasm comes from the Greek word, or the Greek letter chi, which makes sense. It's short for a chiasmus structure, which is the X. So that's the letter in Greek is the X letter. So it's when you go up one side and down the other side, and it makes an X in the middle. So the middle thing is what you're highlighting.
Yeah.
So if you can picture, there's like a thing that happens at the beginning, and the similar thing happens at the very end. And then like towards the middle, there's two things that happen that are very similar. And then in the dead center is something that happens that's different from the other things.
Yeah.
And so that's the highlighted part.
So briefly, the chiasm that we followed, right? We open with the Circle of Life song, beautiful song, right? And it follows Simba being born. Well, he's not born, but his ascension.
Yeah,
it's like him being elevated.
Yeah.
A prince is brought up, world of promise. One might say everything the sun touches will be his to rule. And then you watch him grow a little bit and you see some familial tension, which we'll get into, but you're introduced to the main antagonist, Scar, who clearly wants the throne. So there's tension there. And then, because of some of that tension that we'll talk about and some of the rising action, Simba's forced to flee into the desert. And in the middle, you have his spiritual, ethical, emotional struggle with who he is. That's the main thing he's wrestling with. We'll get more into that in a minute, but he comes to a conclusion through some help. That's in the middle of the movie, or at least at the biggest part, the climax that will introduce the falling action. To get back home, guess what he has to run through?
He has to go through the desert once again, which is going to lead him to another family conflict, once again with Scar.
Also about the throne.
Which is going to end not with Simba being born, but with Simba's son being born and also being kind of risen into this kind of ascension prince structure like the beginning of the book, and it plays Circle of Life at the end.
Yeah. So as you can see, clear plot, clear story, clear trajectory. We also have pretty clear character arcs because of this, right? If you have a clear story and a clear evolution, the characters have to highlight that with their personal growth, such as the main character,
Simba. Yeah, I think Simba, and we were talking earlier about how Simba and Nala kind of work together almost as two halves of the same character. Yeah. And they're both pushing each other, both growing, both developing. And so I think we see Simba, when he comes onto the scene, is very much a child. He is very entitled, kind of arrogant, doesn't quite understand. He likes the idea of being a king, but his version of being a king is just to do whatever he wants. Yeah. And his dad is trying to help him understand that you actually have to take care of the people that you're ruling, or animals in this case, anthropomorphic animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what they are.
And he also lacks like a concept of danger and risk. He takes unnecessary risks. He's manipulative. I mean, he's kind of manipulative, but I mean more so he's manipulated himself.
Yeah. Naive.
Yeah. And then he goes into like a reckless, careless, I do what I want because I'm avoiding my problems.
Nothing matters.
Yeah. Life is a void, or rather actually...
life is a line.
Yeah, Timon and Pumbaa in the newer version talk about how life is not a cycle. It's really a line, and whatever you do doesn't matter. He comes out of that, and then he comes back as a what?
Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Comes back as a
Simba
adult.
Comes back as an adult, like a king.
Like a king, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I see where you're going there. Yeah, so Simba comes back like a king. Yeah, and he rises, he conquers his emotional and personal and ethical problems. He's able to conquer his outward problem as well of Scar and actually receiving the throne.
And not just physically, right? There are some cool, I'm going to say dog fights, but
cat
it's not
fights.
kite fight. Yeah, cat fights. I don't know what I just said there. Catnip fights.
Cat
It's
fights.
not kite fight. You also have to overcome this spiritually. So we see that the mentor figure is his father very clearly. James Earl Jones does a fantastic job in both movies, actually, voicing Mufasa. And Mufasa presents a clear, like Zach's already stated, this clear leadership structure of stewardship. Leadership is stewardship. His brother, Scar, sees it differently, right? That if he is the top dog, or in this case, the top massive carnivorous cat, that he should get whatever he wants, right? And so Mufasa in the movie talks, at least in the newer one, talks about how, Simba, everything the sun touches is yours to steward, right? You rule it, but to rule means that you take care of the environment, you take care of your people, right? Does that mean culling things off? Yes, you have to eat, but you don't want to overhunt. There's a huge emphasis on not overhunting, versus Scar has this direct foil to Mufasa, when he's talking to his henchmen, the hyenas. He says, everything the sun touches is yours for the kill, right? It's yours to exploit, yours to take. So Simba is trapped between these two, and he has to choose.
Yeah, definitely. And foils are a cool tactic and literary device that stories can use to help us understand characters and especially to understand choices. And so by comparing Mufasa and Scar and showing us two sides of these different characters, we see, okay, Mufasa is clearly good and Scar is clearly bad. And so the choice becomes, what is Simba going to do?
Right.
Is he going to act like the Mufasa side of the foil, or is he going to act like the Scar side of the foil?
And for a while, you don't know.
And for a while, you don't know.
The whole, life is a line, Hakuna Matata.
That's very Scar-like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If, nothing matters, you should do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But he has to decide, is everything the sun touches his to steward?
And if you want to access everything the sun touches, make sure to join our Patreon. The link is in the description.
Nice. Smooth.
Thanks. So another couple of characters that we find that have character arcs less so in the animated version. They do have some. They become a little bit more brave, I think, but more so in the newer animated one is Timon and Pumbaa. So, Josh, what did you think about Timon and Pumbaa?
But when I was a young warthog.
When I was a young warthog.
I thought they were funny, and they still are. But in the newer Lion King, in a lot of stories, you have this duo that serves as comedic humor, typically a taller and a shorter thing, C-3PO, R2-D2, Legolas, and Gimli to some degree. But in this one, Timon and Pumbaa. And they, in the newer version, they are very, I'm going to use this, I know it's a loaded word, but they're atheistic. Right? Almost Darwinian, it's all about, in their own weird way, survival of the fittest. And so you
kind of like naturalist.
Yeah. Right? Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you very well could die.
It's almost animalistic.
Hey, very good.
Thank you.
I see what you did there.
Thanks. And it's true, actually. Yeah.
And so there's this really beautiful scene where they ask Simba, hey, what do you believe? What is your worldview? What's your philosophy? And Simba basically says, well, when I was a kid, I was taught that everything's a cycle. It's circle of life, cyclical. What you do is going to impact somebody else, right? So it matters. And Timon and Pumbaa erupt in laughter at him. And they say, life's not a cycle, it's a line. And that's when they get into the whole Hakuna Matata thing. But by the end of the movie, right, they have a choice. Are they going to do what they want and choose self-preservation, or are they going to fight for the greater good? They end up crossing the desert too, making a choice. And by the end, they have this really cool line. And they say, well, maybe life isn't quite a line. Maybe it has a little curve in it. Right? And so you see that they actually change it, and they're willing to sacrifice their desires for the greater good. Yeah,
because their actions actually have consequences and matter in a good way. They're actually able to help Simba and Nala take back the throne. So along with that idea of philosophy and whether or not our choices matter, as The Lion King, which is a kid's movie, but also kind of engages these deeper questions, what about a clear ethical lesson?
Yeah, well, I think you have a lot of purpose conversation. Is life, like that cycle idea versus linear, is it just about you or is it about others? Do you impact others or not? And in the clear lesson, Simba decides to live like, and I think we see it benefit the whole, which proves its reality. Life isn't about you, and it's also not purposeless. You have a purpose.
Yeah, I think Lion King is definitely trying to tell us that life is not meaningless. Yeah. We also see, similar to what we talked about in Up or in Gladiator or even in Dune, I think more part 2 than part 1 from our previous episode, but we see Simba has to deal with loss. Mm-hmm. And he goes through, we were talking about this in our notes, and I think I would argue that Simba goes through at least some, but I think all of the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with those, that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And those can come in different kind of orders, but eventually you come to that 5th one, which is acceptance. And you are able to move forward. You might not be the same, but you're able to move forward with the loss that has occurred.
Which, before we go on, I think it might be beneficial for if anybody hasn't seen Lion King, even though it's a classic, right? Like, what sets up the loss, Zach? Like, what does Simba lose?
Yeah, Simba loses his father. Mufasa is killed. And he's killed by Scar, but the crux of the issue is that Simba believes that it's his fault, that he killed Mufasa.
Because Scar is
manipulative.
An adversary, liar.
Serpent-like, deceiver,
But it's also a beautiful scene because Mufasa sacrifices himself for his son. And he believes in his son, and he's willing to do that. And there's an element of betrayal because, there's this whole thing about Scar not betraying him ever again. What does Scar do? He betrays him, he kills him, and he even betrays his memory by convincing his son he's a liar. You want to hear more about that? Go to episode 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep, go to 2 for more on betrayal. So we see these stages of grief, and at first, Simba, I think, deals with denial and just has to get away, has to not dig into his feelings, he runs into the desert so much so that he gets to the point of death before Timon and Pumbaa find him. And then I think he starts to go into the bargaining phase. And I think that's when you're Hakuna Matata. So nothing really matters, right? No worries. That's what Hakuna Matata is supposed to mean, is no worries. And it's the idea that you shouldn't worry because nothing really has any meaning or influence on your life. And so I think that's his bargaining, is he is trying to say, well, I don't have to deal with my emotions if nothing matters. And so he's bargaining almost with himself.
Which part of that might also be anger, right? He might be angry at what happened. His dad promised him these things. He taught him these ethical lessons, told him how he was supposed to live, and then this tragic thing happens.
Yeah.
So some of it might be anger acting
I think it could be mixed, and I know, especially in the first animated version, I think it comes to a head. I don't know how to distinguish
the live action, not live action one.
I think it comes to kind of this forceful conclusion when Nala arrives, because he goes from excitement that Nala is here, and then as soon as she says, hey, now that I found you, you need to go back and fix this.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm not worthy, I can't do it, and the depression sinks in, and then when Nala leaves, he gets angry at his father. You didn't prepare me for this, you left me. And then when Rafiki shows up, it brings him into... So Rafiki is like the spiritual monkey guideline, guidance, like
he gives some guidelines.
He does give some guidelines. So
with his stick,
you've learned, you ducked. So he helps Simba come to a place of acceptance.
Yeah, which is a deeper part because he actually has to continually choose that acceptance. But, another clear ethical lesson, kind of even jumping off of that, is truth versus lies. We even kind of, Zach described Scar, which is a great villain, but he's a great villain because he's a liar.
Yeah.
Right. You think about like the greatest villains, like the goats, right? You think like Emperor Palpatine, Voldemort, they're great because they're liars. Their strength isn't necessarily just a physical brute power, which is like Mufasa.
Yeah, it's words.
Right. They're serpent-like in that they're manipulative. They can kind of craft situations behind the scenes, forked tongues, saying two things to two different people, etc. So what's a big lie that Simba is confronted with, Zach?
Yeah, I think very early on, Simba's confronted with this idea that he doesn't need anybody.
Which is not true, right? Because he sees even without his dad, what would have happened?
Well, even without his dad, he would have died.
He would have died.
Yeah.
And then he also needs Nala, which maybe at some point we'll do a Patreon thing about how girlfriends are supposed to help you grow up. But Nala like makes him grow up, and without Nala, he would have stayed in this teenage angst stage for forever. But another one is he's lied to about his identity. That Scar plants this seed of you're never gonna be good enough. Like there's this epic as in like not. It is cool, but it's not cool.
Right. Epic as in emotional, like powerful, but not good.
Yeah, where Scar tells Simba, oh, you have to run and hide because you're a boy who killed the king. You're a son who murdered his father. How would your mom ever accept you back? Your family's going to hate you. And Simba immediately internalizes these things, which there's a commentary there about, children, the words of adults are actually powerful things. And, we got to be careful about what we say. But also, your identity should not be rooted just in what other people say about you, or else you will be manipulated.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the greatest ethical lessons that we can learn from The Lion King is the power of words and the power of this truth versus lies kind of argument and mentality so that we can actually be conscious of the words that we're saying and the ideas that we're taking in and the truth that we're listening to so that we can live better with more confidence as we have a better understanding and appreciation of ourselves.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's the truth that pulls him back to that. Right, because his dad told him who he was. His dad told him, you are a king.
Yep.
You are a clear figure who's supposed to serve and care and live up to these expectations, not because you have to, because it's who you are.
Yeah, remember who you are.
Right, just James Earl Jones just saying remember is an iconic line. Like that last before the lion cloud, lightning storm thing goes away. Remember. Right, and Simba has to. Because he's been fed these lies, but he knows that's not who he is. And there's also this cool Rafiki moment where Rafiki has to kind of bonk him on the head, literally and, metaphorically, to show Simba this, right? He has to bring Simba to this reflective pool, right? And then, he goes through this thing of saying, like, the big question, Simba, is who are you? Right? We have to answer that ethically, like us as an audience. Who do we say that we are? And Simba has to go through this process where, he has to look in the reflection of like the water and say, I am my dad. I'm what my dad says about me. And that's when the Mufasa like spiritual cloud thing happens.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. He has to reflect on the example of his dad and who he wants to be like so that he doesn't end up like Scar.
Which brings us to some clear conflict. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, definitely. We have from the very beginning of the movie, in the original animated movie, it's like scene 3. So Simba is introduced and everybody does the whole cheering thing. And there's like the whole like sun shines down on Pride Rock and everything is awesome. And then like the very next cutscene is Scar sulking about how now that he has a nephew, he's no longer next in line for the throne. And so everything is terrible because he'll never be the king now. And so immediately we realize, okay, Scar, just digitally looks like a villain. He has a literal scar. He's got the black mane where everybody else has like the colorful manes. And so he's skinnier, darker pelt. Yeah, like he looks, I think he's got like the green menacing eyes.
He does have green eyes.
Yeah, so he immediately, we're like, okay, this dude's bad news. And he now wants the throne. So we have this clear conflict. And it's not even it's about Simba, but it's not Simba's choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the inverse of that, like we talk about chiasms, when Simba does return, the conflict is still who's the true king, the liar or the one who believed the lie?
Yeah, the usurper or the one who abandoned his people.
Yeah. And ultimately the conflict is resolved, the falling action, they get into this epic, like we said, cat fight.
Yep.
Simba comes out on top, not just because of his prowess, but because Scar is trapped in those lies he set for himself.
Yeah.
So kids, going back to clear ethical lesson, you make your bed with lies. Sometimes you got to lie in it. Get it?
Got to pull those covers up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, lies.
Yeah, I know. I got you. Okay,
we're good.
Okay, so yeah, and I think the movie does such a great job at this because Simba is actually losing the physical fight until he uncovers and kind of disassembles the lie. And then it's almost as if knowing the truth empowers him to beat Scar when he was previously losing.
Yep. We also have some engaging, relatable characters, right? That was another thing we mentioned. And that's there, right? So, Zach, who's a engaging and relatable character for you?
Yeah, so one of my favorite characters is actually Scar. I love Scar. He's probably top 3 villains of Disney. I think he's excellent, along with like Maleficent and Jafar and Mufasa, which all do a similar kind of like serpent, deceiver, manipulation kind of vibe. And I think that's why they're such compelling and engaging characters, is we know people like this, and we are tempted to sometimes be this way as well.
Yeah.
Well, I can get what I want if I tell people 2 different stories, or if I shade in the lines or manipulate the facts or change the history, and then I will get the kingdom that I want.
Which, the best, most relatable villains, they follow an archetype.
Mm-hmm.
You got to ask yourself, why is that the archetype?
Yep.
But yeah, Scar's a great villain. I really wanted to sneak in. When you said Mufasa, I really wanted to interrupt you and say it again. Mufasa.
Ooh, it gives me chills.
Yeah. I think also like Timon and Pumbaa are relatable, right? Because again, bad things happen. They both have trauma, and you see that in like Lion King. Was it like 1.5?
Yeah.
Is that what they call it?
I don't talk about Lion King 1.5.
Oh, come on. That was such a... I mean, I haven't watched it as a grown person, but as
I would
a child.
have to go back and watch it.
But like we know that they have stories, and Simba chooses, and that choice is actually healing for them. But the whole like Hakuna Matata, do what you want, like you can escape, like that's something society teaches us. Don't confront your issues.
Just
don't
run
get
away.
into conflict.
Yep.
Right? Don't grow. Like legwork's hard. Don't do squats. Just do arm day. These are all societal narratives, and so we actually have to do that. But we feel like we should be like Timon and Pumbaa. Slurp up slugs. Yeah, so Timon and Pumbaa, totally relatable characters.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've talked about how Simba and Nala are kind of that joint character together. And on their own, Simba is an interesting character, but also not super compelling.
Yeah.
And it's Nala that motivates him into producing change and to move that plot line and that character arc along. And in the same way, we don't hear a lot about Nala without Simba. So we really need both of them together to form almost a captivating or engaging couple as opposed to an individual character.
Yeah, Nala's like the lantern character that guides Simba. Kind of a foil in some ways, but not totally. But Simba, like we talked about in the hero's journey, which Patreon, if you want to get on, that might be there waiting.
There's a bonus episode.
But Simba is kind of bland as the protagonist because you are supposed to put yourself into Simba, right? We all want to be king. That's a whole human thing. Like we don't like authority. We want what we want anyways. But just touching on the engaging, relatable characters. That's part of the blandness, but they're still cool.
Yeah, definitely. So once we kind of wrap up with the characters and the plot, the arcs, the conflict resolution, one thing that we need as kind of the cherry on top that brings us in and wraps the whole thing together to make us enter the story, not just something that we read about or watch, but that we enter in, is a captivating world.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think, Josh, gives us a captivating world in Lion King? Because you get sucked in.
Yeah. I mean, hot take. Maybe it's a cold take, but my take is it's the colors. It's just the liveliness of the animals, and to bring something up in that childlike instinct within you. Like you go into the zoo, it feels like a holiday. It feels magical. But it's also the songs. Right? I know that you want to say something probably about the elephant graveyard and the song there, but just like even like there's some sweeping epic music throughout it, and even the songs alone kind of tell you the plot. So all those things together, it pulls you in. It's not too heavy, but you feel gravity, right? Because we know animals, lions, they eat the other animals, and so there's like there's still like an escalated risk, right? You stand to lose something. We talked about that a little bit last episode. So that is my mediocre, lukewarm take.
Yeah, I don't think it's a hot take.
Okay.
Maybe you have to heat in the microwave a little bit.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think so. We talked about like the anthropomorphic animals and how they're animals and they act like animals, right? Even Simba's like, Dad, don't we eat the antelope? And Dad's like, well, yes, but then we also die so that the antelope can eat us as grass. And so there's like this idea of how the animals are supposed to relate together. And so they're animals, but they also have intrigue, politics, a royal lineage, and like secession to the throne, and
kind of like a Shakespearean play.
Kind of like a Shakespearean play, which, if you want to see or listen to a bonus episode on the connections between Hamlet from Shakespeare and the Lion King, feel free to subscribe to us on patreon.com to hear that bonus episode.
Yep.
So we see the politics, the intrigue, the anthropomorphic animals, and the amazing music from Hans Zimmer just like blows it out of the water.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Was the OG soundtrack?
The OG is so good.
Is that also Hans Zimmer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
It is so good. Hans Zimmer just like destroys, like,
well, he destroys anything he touches.
Oh my goodness. The man just like, he's like, how do I make an animated show about lions feel like a battle between dynasties? He's like, give me 1 second.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't recognize that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I knew he was in the new one. I just didn't recognize.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, he did both. Super awesome. Banger soundtrack. And we also get like the creepiest graveyard scene ever, which is just fantastic. I love the elephant graveyard. It's like, it does the perfect job of being like a kid's animated show. And also you're like, oh, this place looks super creepy, actually.
Kind of hellish.
Yeah, this is not a good spot to be. Not a good spot to be. So as we kind of wrap things up with The Lion King, we've talked about a lot of different things. The characters, the story, the plot, the world itself. What about consistency?
Easy answer. It's all cyclical. Like it starts one way, it ends that way. You have clear points, a clear rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion. Like it's just... the whole thing is life, a circle of life. Do things matter? And so my answer is an easy yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things we look for in a story is it sets up rules, and consistency is if it follows its own rules. Because we're willing to look past things because we're entering into a story. And so we're willing to acknowledge that animals are talking when they're not supposed to talk. But as long as all of the rules of the story are followed, then that's consistent. And I don't think it sets us up for anything that breaks down later in the story. And we see the circle of life. One of my favorite lines is the ending line of the opening song of Circle of Life. And it talks about how the circle of life is moving us through despair and hope and faith and love to find our place in the circle of life. So actions matter, people matter, and reflecting on what has happened in the past helps you to live for the future.
Even your tragedies.
Your tragedies.
Like death provides life.
Yeah. You may not be the same, but you can still move on.
Well, just like the circle of life, all good things come to an end to generate a new thing. Brings us to what, Zach?
Brings us to the end. And if you just can't wait to be king, make sure to leave a comment on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, anywhere you find our podcast. Leave us a comment, leave us a review, and we would love to interact with you, help our community to interact with one another as we're growing.
And this is just, part of that. I know it's cliche. Zach and I know this, but it's super helpful if you like and subscribe. But our Pathfinders program's rolling out. Right. So if you want to get on Patreon and you want to join the community in a larger way, joining the paid plans will not only get you deeper into the hunt to find the greatest story, but you'll also get some resources that are exclusive, whether that's notes. We've hyped a couple podcast exclusive ones, and some other cool things like joining a Discord server where you can find like-minded individuals. But all those things are important. So that brings us to the not the final step, but one of the final steps. Yeah,
definitely. One of the things that we're going to do now that we have set our framework and we've introduced our first story, which is super exciting, is we're going to start ranking our stories so that we can create every several episodes or so a tier list of where we place the stories that we've covered so far.
Yeah.
So, Josh, what would you say? We have a kind of a tier list, a tier ranking. What is our tier ranking, and where would you place Lion King?
Well, right now our tier list is empty. This is the fresh start.
Right. Give me the ranking system.
Oh yeah. So I mean, S is just superb, absolutely phenomenal, god tier,
Outstanding,
OP, overpowered.
Can't do anything better.
Yeah, which is obviously Revenge of the Sith. Just kidding. Nope.
There's your hot take.
Hello there.
General Kenobi.
A is just really really good. Not like perfection, but like exquisite, chef's kiss. B, above average, solidly enjoyable meal, 4 out of 5. Come back again.
Would
soon.
recommend. Yep.
Yeah. C is you pass.
Yep.
You are a story. We call you good.
You are a story.
D is my old high school teachers would once say, other.
Yeah.
Everything below that is the other category, and other gets progressively worse.
Yeah.
So that's the story.
Yeah. If we put stories in D or F, it means we're trying to find the good elements.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. The whole shtick is still finding what's good about a story.
Yep.
So that means we had to fight really hard.
Yep. We had to fight. Yeah. So where would you put Lion King?
Easy A.
Yep. I agree with that. I would put it there too for the reasons we've discussed, right? Clear plot, enjoyable characters, awesome soundtrack, captivating world, just brings it all together. Are there things that could have gone better? Maybe. I mean, it's also a 75-minute animated show. So we're looking at what it can do, and I think it accomplishes a lot.
Yeah, we don't want to make S top heavy.
Correct.
Like S should
be superb. It should be outstanding. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, Josh, what do you think we're talking about next episode?
We're just going to explore what do dragons, eggs, and farm boys have in common.
A healthy breakfast. Okay, here we go.
We were recording that whole time?
Yeah, of course you were recording that whole time, okay. Josh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Should I snap?
Yeah. Josh, if you read this first, can you please check the banana bread when the timer goes off around 6 p.m.? Stick a toothpick in, and if it comes out clean, you can take it out. Thank you so much.
Who is that from?
Oh, it's from Lydia, because she's getting ready to leave.
Why is it a title to me?
I guess here up at the top, you and Josh may eat the banana bread once it cools.
Okay.
So,
cool.
There you go. In 30 minutes, I have to take when the timer goes off.
Is that the blooper?
Yeah, I guess. We're eating banana bread in your face, listeners.
Is there a way to tie that into Lion King?
I don't think so. Everything the sun touches is your banana bread.
That's weird. Anyways, here we go. Snap time.